into the room. You're free to just be you. Tell me your story, and we will go exploring. Let's explore together. Let's explore together.
Hello and welcome to Sack in the City. I'm your host, Teresa Marie. Joining us here today is Myki, and we are thrilled to have her. We are going to cover a plethora of topics.
A lot,
including the metoo movement, as well as sexuality, and very excited to talk about the Women's International Music Network and learn more about that. I'm super thrilled about that. Myki, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Oh my goodness. When you asked me, I was like, what? She wants to interview me? What? Yes, let's do this.
Samesies. All the way. Super stoked to have you. Myki in our community is somebody who is so beautiful and eloquent and outspoken. She is very, very well-versed in a lot of different subjects. And so we are feeling extremely fortunate to have her on the show to talk about all these topics. So without further ado, let's dive in, shall we?
Yeah, let's do it.
My sleeves are already rolled up.
Let's do this.
I'm ready to go. Yes. So before we dive into the plethora I was talking about, let's talk a little bit about Myki.
Okay.
Little Myki. Few years ago. Childhood, upbringing. How was that for you?
So I grew up in a broken household. I mean, my parents divorced when I was less than 2, I think, or just a little over 2. And they even didn't get married actually until after I was born. It was a situation, it was, I would say, trouble from the get-go. My dad didn't believe my mom when she was pregnant that I was his. And then after I was born, his sisters convinced him, this is your kid. He was like, all right, got it together. But volatile relationship from the get. So I grew up in 2 households my whole life. I think that actually made me stronger because I could compare apples to oranges. You know, living with my father, he had the money and he had the stability. You know, he worked a very good job. He held down a house. My mom, it was hard for her. She was always, because it was the late 60s, early 70s. So being a single mom, it was a lot harder. You know, that was a time when women were expected, in the hetero world, women were expected to be married, and the man was the one who made the money, and the woman was the one who held down the house. So then all of a sudden, she was struggling trying to do both of that.
Right.
So there were a lot of custody battles. My brother and I, actually. I have a brother that's a year younger from this gathering. It gets deeper because I actually have 3 brothers and 3 sisters. We can get that later if you want to. But so there was a lot of going back and forth, custody battles between living with the dad and then living with my mom. And I can remember growing up in grade school, sometimes I'm sleeping, I'm about to wake up, and I don't open my eyes because I'm wishing I'm at my mom's. And I'm laying in bed going, okay, you're at your mom's, because I just loved being with my mom over my father. And then opening my eyes, and if I was at my dad's, I would just break down and cry.
What was it about being at your mom's that you loved more, that you preferred?
She spent time with us. She played with us. She taught us things. My dad, his whole thing was I have money and I put food on the table and that's it.
And that's my job.
That's my job. Didn't really spend time with us. I tell you, I got really good. You know why I'm really good at researching? I have to credit my dad. I would ask him, what does this mean? And he would say, go look it up. That's it. He had a plethora of like encyclopedias, all these books, because back then people ordered books when door-to-door salesmen came to the door. And
just about to bring this up,
yes,
because I was like, Myki is a little older than she looks. This is way before Google. So I'm wondering where you looked up the information.
Exactly. It was
Yeah.
actual books, ladies and gentlemen. Books with pages and binding.
I miss the smell of
The smell of books.
paper and-
Anytime I
yes.
ask anything, Dad, what does this mean? Go look it up.
Yeah. And you did.
So I did. I didn't know any different. I wasn't mad about it.
Right.
I just did it. You know, with my mom, we would love bugging her to tell us stories of when we were young, and she would tell us fun stories about when we were kids, and she would teach us about the sky and colors and people and being kind to animals. And she supported, I love to draw. I was an artist at a very young age, and she supported me drawing 2-foot sperm whales on the inside of the garage, and she didn't get mad about that.
That's cool.
Right. So,
Yeah.
you know, I think that's why I always preferred, if I could have a choice, which we didn't as kids, live with my mom versus my
Right.
dad.
Do you feel that you had a well-rounded or a healthy upbringing?
Oh my gosh, that's a good question, because I think that's the perspective of the person who thinks what's a healthy upbringing.
Sure.
As far as a lot of positive, a positive upbringing, not necessarily. Well-rounded and something to learn from, absolutely. I think it's just the way you look at it.
Sure.
I mean, I grew up with abuse. I grew up with neglect. I grew up with, like I said, the custody battles, which was going to court stuff. I grew up with being raised with my grandmother as our babysitter half the time, because my mom would have to work night jobs. The jobs that she could get at the time were waitressing and bartending,
Right.
so which are predominantly night gigs.
Yeah.
So we would, but the cool thing with that was is she could take us to school, she could pick us up from school, but she would go off to work before we would go to bed. So then usually grandmother, and once in a while it was a different, babysitter.
Right.
But I remember a lot of fun things too. It wasn't like, I'm not going to sit here and say this horror, one day I'm going to have my own Goalcast video, but in the Goalcast video, it isn't just going to be about the things I just described. I have a lot of fun memories. I have memories of going to amusement parks, having parties in parks. My mom at times, you don't realize this till you get older, but she went through a stint where she was living in hotels. But to me, I looked forward to getting a soda pop that was in a glass from the vending machine and sitting around the pool of the hotel.
So wonderful.
Well, yeah. So for me, that was great.
Yes. Yes.
We were always fed. We always had clothes. She read us stories at night. So where we lived wasn't as important as how we lived. So there you go.
Really amazing to me because you clearly have such a positive spin. There are a lot of people that, if they talk about their childhood and they name all these, wonderful positive things that you just did, and, they just kind of like mention abuse and then they keep going on. That was really amazing because I can already tell that you're somebody who chooses to focus on the positive.
Always.
Is that true?
Always.
However, I do
know.
have to dial it back a little bit here because you did mention abuse.
Yes.
And that is important, and that is something really imperative to talk about. What type of abuse were you?
Subjected to.
Yes.
I was subjected to all of it. And by all of it, I mean physical, sexual, emotional, psychological. And it was all on the male side of family. It was all family. From the time I was 6 until I was 13.
It started when you were 6?
Correct.
And it ended when you were 13?
Correct, because at that point, I was put into foster care.
At 13?
Yes.
What form of abuse started first when you were 6? Was it the sexual?
It was sexual.
It was sexual abuse.
Yes. Only I didn't know that. We title it as abuse.
Right.
Because it was non-consensual, and I was 6 at the time. So if you break it down in a logical sense,
Yes.
was I actually abused? Never. In fact, I didn't even really think about it until after the abuse when I was 12 and 13 happened, and then the memory came back because the person who did it was very kind when they did it. I mean, I can separate myself from it. I've had years to think about it. I am older. For that person, for him, the family member, he may have thought he was doing something loving with me, and he was going about it in a loving manner, and it wasn't anything that was painful. So I'm not going to go into details, but knowing the difference between that and then when I became 12 and 13 and dealt with tons of physical abuse And then the physical abuse would stop when the sexual abuse started. So, and that was definitely not my consent. And a lot of alcohol was involved when that would happen. It would happen in the middle of the night when I'm sleeping and someone's coming in my room. So I just shut my eyes and I just pretend I'm asleep because I can't believe this is happening. I don't know that there's anything I can do about it. I'm 12, I'm 13. I'm in my own bed when this is happening. Did I imagine the person that did it had guns in the house? Did I imagine, because I learned how to shoot at a young age, did I imagine myself finding that gun and loading that gun and taking care of that person? Yeah, I did. To end it, but I didn't do it.
When it started at 6,
Yeah.
this person, as you said, was very kind to you, very, very loving, if you will. You never felt uncomfortable, though? You never felt violated, or
No,
this is
not at
weird,
6.
or
I didn't. What do I compare it to when I'm 6?
well, that's true, but
And my younger siblings were around too, but they didn't see it.
right,
It was very, because I don't want to go into detail, and I'm not trying to blast out because there are other
Sure.
family members that, like, I'm not trying to do that.
Yeah.
The focus I know is how it affects you, how
Right.
your trauma and triggers, and how that affects you later as an adult. And I know, looking back on it and remembering it, it was just very discreet, and it was just, he just was loving in how he did it.
so clearly, so you didn't know it was wrong,
No.
and so did you ever tell anyone? Did
No,
you ever
because I didn't
confide
know.
into
No,
anybody?
there was nothing to tell.
Did
Well,
you-
after the fact, yes.
Okay.
When I was older. And then I said, I remember that too. And this person, because this person was a babysitter at times.
So as you got
watching me.
older and you started learning and experiencing more, that's
Yeah.
when kind of the flag came up that,
Yes.
whoa,
Yeah.
that's actually not natural,
Correct.
not how everybody shows kindness.
Correct.
And, okay,
And there was way more that happened to it as I got older, because
Right.
I'm developed.
right,
Right? Let's be real. Physically, I'm developed.
right.
And that was clearly, for these people, it was a turn on for them.
Did you, as you did get older, did you ever have a conversation with any of them about what
No.
they put you through or experienced? Do you still
No.
talk to them?
No, because they're passed away.
Okay.
But even before they did, no.
Do you think that they ever came to terms with what they did?
That is a very good question. And I think in talking about that, that's something as a victim, we as victims have to come to terms with. That's probably never that information will probably never be known.
Fair.
And that was part of, and I know that is another of many reasons why I became a journalist and I question things as often as I do, because I wanted to know the why. Why
Yeah.
was so huge, because it's not something I would ever do.
Right.
So I cannot relate to that. And the why was there. And like I said, I ended up in foster care. And the reason I did is because my mom was living out of state. And when she was one of the first that I told, and then police were involved, and being screened by the doctor was involved, and I couldn't stay with anybody, a family that was in town because of the relation. She comes into town. She had to prove that she had a steady job and a steady home before I could live with her. That's what the law was in the early 80s. So therefore, I'm in foster care until she can establish that. Meanwhile, the very first house I go to, the second house, I had to be moved from the first house. The second house I go to, that husband tried to molest me. And then I got moved to a third house. I'm like bouncing.
The foster parent?
I'm bouncing houses for like 9 months until my mom gets
Let me back up
established.
just a
Okay.
minute here.
Is this a lot?
You were, yeah, I mean, I got to back up, but I mean,
Yeah.
it's a lot of like good. Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to make sure that I have this right though. You were sent initially to foster care was it because of the sexual abuse that was reported, or because your mom moved out
It was
of
the
town?
it was the sexual. Well, it's because the sexual and physical abuse that was reported.
Okay.
I had nowhere to stay until
see.
my mother established herself. She was living in another state, and
You
she came
couldn't live
back-
with your dad?
No.
Okay. Okay. So you were put in foster care, and then one of the people that was supposed to take care of you through foster care, also abused you.
Tried to
Abuse you.
And this is, and I want to add this too because I remember this so vividly. I was just entering into ninth grade, just entering into high school, and I report it because I know it's wrong. I know it's wrong, and I'll never forget this. So I leave, and I'm outside. It's dark. I'm leaning against my social worker's car, and she's like, and she looks at me, and she says, "Wow, you just fucked that up, didn't you?"
Wow.
Put that on me.
Wow.
No, I'm 13. I take it. I'm like, I really fucked that up because I was raised, and let's back that up again. I was raised a lot on my dad's side of the family, Filipino Catholic upbringing. Spare the rod, spoil the child. All kinds of things. So, and I tried so hard to please authority figures, adults. You know, I come from, I mean, because this can go on for 2 hours. I probably should footnotes it. I mean, I grew up with a lot of abandonment and neglect, and just wanting to be loved and wanting to be accepted.
But this.
So when she said that to me, I believed her because I was so gullible to think, why would somebody say something to me that isn't true? And why would they say something to me that wasn't in my best interest?
Her job is to work with foster children. I mean,
and when
she
you're
doesn't
a kid,
come from your background or upbringing.
No.
I maybe she was Filipino Catholic. I don't know.
No,
but
she was Caucasian.
I mean, I'm sorry. That just like blew my mind to the point that I'm just absolutely dumbfounded because
it's
that is so disgusting.
This was 1981 or 1980.
Okay, so did she take the proper steps then against this foster family,
I don't know.
You don't know?
No. Remember, this is way before the internet, and we could take cell phones and we could record things and put them on the internet and they go viral.
But I still feel like you would
know.
know if she did, because I feel like you would have been questioned further.
No, me questioned?
Well, they would want to know, hey,
you know what
happened? You know
I'm
what I'm
going to
saying?
go real here. Let's go real here.
Okay.
Because there's something I wanted to add to this.
Yes.
The difference in where it was now. One of the people who molested me and physically abused me was my father. I'll be honest with that.
Okay.
That's why I couldn't stay with the family, because it was his family.
That makes sense.
He didn't go to jail.
Okay.
I remember being in court, and I remember being on the stand. And even my mom backed this up. And the judge left it up to me to say, what did I want done to my dad? Do you want to see your dad go to jail? Why would you ask a 13-year-old who's been abused since she was 6?
Oh, man.
Why do I get that responsibility? And so all I said was, I just don't want to be near him anymore. So what they do is they gave him a choice.
Yeah.
And they said, you can either go to jail or you can leave the state. And so he moved to Hawaii. And the weird part was, I remember family being mad because they didn't know that sexual was part of it. They thought it was just physical, and they were mad at me because they had said, how dare you have your dad arrested? He's your dad. Like, as if the physical abuse was part of punishment, because a lot of people, they beat their kids.
Yeah.
Whether it was belts, whether it was hands, before CPS became a big thing. Mm-hmm. I'll never forget that people came over to help him because he was retiring and moving to Hawaii, but a lot of the family didn't know why. And so, like, a lot of the female cousins came over and helped clean his house because he was going to rent it out, and it was a big old barbecue and party, and I'm there. Because I'm expected to be there.
He got more support than most people do just when they are moving and they're decent.
But what's happening to me at 13?
With respect to you.
I'm being neglected for what really happened.
Yep.
I'm being denied that actually happened.
Yep.
And I'm being expected to support him and be there to celebrate that he's moving. That in itself, if that isn't a Me Too moment before Me Too became Me Too, I don't know what is.
Yeah.
Because that's a perfect example, no matter what age you are, a victim of Me Too goes through.
Yep.
And so if you want to ask yourself, why didn't they come forward sooner? There you go. They didn't realize.
Yep.
They weren't ever put in a position where they had a voice. They weren't ever, I'm going to be asked, why wasn't I asked, how did that make you feel? Where do you want to go? Where would you feel safer? I was asked, do you want him to go to jail? Why was it all of a sudden back to him? It was never about me. It was never about me.
When they asked you this, was it in
the judge?
when the judge asked you this, was it behind closed doors, just maybe you
It
and the
was on
judge
the
and
stand.
someone else? So it was literally in a
In
public
front of my
forum.
father, in front of his attorney.
So it was in front of everybody. So it wasn't a one-on-one, you know.
My mother was there, yeah. Wow. That's how cases were handled with that, because they didn't know what to do with it. When you look at history and the way that it's done, kids didn't have a voice.
I mean, to me, it seems like
I mean, skipping forward, which is why
psychology.
I'm so for the kids that stood up for the gun control and the walkout, because I remember being their age. In my moment when it's, and I don't know that others are suffering like me.
Right.
Because I'm not speaking up. Until you can speak up and you hear others speak up with you, you
Right.
think you're alone in the world and you think you are the only person going through that.
Very well said.
It's
Very well
it's
said.
the truth.
It is absolutely the truth. But I think what I find a little mind-blowing is the fact that it's, I know we're talking several years ago. I know we're talking,
my
you know,
gosh.
decades before Me Too. But here's the thing is that it's psychology 101 that if you're in front of your abuser, you're not going to be able to be open and honest about, you know, your feelings or what's going on, especially because you've been conditioned to a certain point.
Yes.
So even if we're talking about, you know, 40 years ago or whatever,
Yeah.
to me, I feel like, how could they not know that? That is like literally 101 basics. You don't even need a background in psychology to be able to put those two things together and be like, oh, yeah. So,
But the real question is why did they want to not deal with it? They knew better.
correct.
Will I ever know? No.
Yeah.
That was another hard not knowing to swallow growing up.
So let's talk
My
about
mother was furious.
getting past that then.
Okay.
Because as we've mentioned, that was many years ago.
Mm-hmm.
You are, nothing about you says victim. I mean, you are a strong, amazing
Thank you.
woman. How have you dealt with this? How have those cycles gone for you that you've gotten from there to where you are today?
I honestly think it's I have a huge capacity of empathy for people and for situations. And it was always a wanting to know, putting myself, even if it was his shoes or the other abusers in my life, what brought them to that and why. Wanting to know what makes people tick.
Wow.
Because then I would at least know, do I excuse it? Absolutely not. Forgiveness, I don't think I still know how to forgive people. I'm that's what I'm trying to learn. I wish I really knew, because I did a little therapy. Of course, they did. They had me go through therapy, but some of it helped, some of it didn't. It was, again, it felt no different than the way the judge approached my situation. I don't know that it was more to help me, if it was just because I had to go through that.
Right.
I definitely worked hard to want to prove that anything that ever happened to me or whatever, I wanted to distance myself so much from those people and prove that I could be on my own without having that be an effect. I think my strong personality, my empathy, and my drive to always want to do the right thing. But I do know that suffering from that has caused control freak nature about me, which I didn't realize I had. I had a friend actually point that out to me literally 12, 15 years ago, because I had a control freak nature, they call it, right? Having a controlling personality, because I grew up not having a lot of control over what was done to me.
Interesting.
So you fight hard to control the things you can,
Right.
because I need to be seen and not heard. Whatever I'm doing is none of your business to you.
Right.
So therefore is that the reason why to this day I don't drink or smoke or do drugs? Maybe.
Right.
I think it is.
Right.
I grew up in a house of alcoholics and drug users and chain smokers, cigarettes,
And so you chose that you were not going to continue that cycle.
I tell you, I was the one who was destroying my mom and dad's cigarettes. I was the one that was hiding the alcohol. Which is interesting, because of all the siblings, I'm the only one like that.
Your father is an alcoholic, is that correct?
He was. He passed
Okay.
away, but yes. Oh,
Okay.
yes. He was drunk every time he came in my room.
Okay.
Southern Comfort is the worst smell ever, because that's the smell he loved. That's what he smelled. I shouldn't love. That was his favorite drink, and that smell is a trigger like no other for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fair.
So my mom, alcoholic. I mean, a lot of people know this. I used to post a lot. I don't live with her anymore, but when we did and I was taking care of her, because vodka is her drink of choice. She grew up as an alcoholic and a smoker. It just was the thing. I grew up and people smoked in the house. We're talking like, it looked like a pool hall back in the 70s. I mean, billiards. Pool hall, you know, with just the smoke floating in the air. People didn't think that they shouldn't smoke around kids or people who don't smoke. Secondhand smoke, it was just, there were studies saying that's actually worse for you than smoking. So.
I'm going to ask a really difficult question.
Okay.
But both your parents were alcoholics.
Yes.
Your dad sexually abused you.
Yes. And physically
Do
abused
you
me.
think if your mom hadn't been a drinker that she would have known what was going on?
Well, no, because they weren't together at this point and she lived in another state. So she didn't know that he was doing that.
Okay.
Because the moment she knew,
Right.
she came back and wanted to kill him.
Okay.
So I didn't grow up in that kind of a household, thank goodness. There wasn't a denial on, because that does happen, where a parent will deny and turn a blind eye. My
Yes.
grandmother denied it, didn't think, she called me a liar. And that was my mom's mom. That wasn't even his mom.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm just making up stories because I want attention.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
And I can't say that that doesn't happen.
Sure.
I'm sure that happens. In my case, I was telling the truth.
right. That's a really, really difficult
Yeah.
thing, and that is a lot to take on. And I can't imagine being the parent separated from your child and then finding out that that is what they've been going through. That has to be extremely difficult.
It dripped her apart.
It
did.
I can imagine. I can
Yeah.
absolutely imagine that. Awesome. Let's go ahead and take a break and decompress. When we talk about, we're going to finish this subject and we'll come back and talk about lots more interesting things.